The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in February 1876, informing Nathan Kendrick that his uncle's estate had finally been settled, and a small property in the Arizona Territory now belonged to him. Nathan stood on the busy street corner in Denver, reading the words 3 times before folding the paper and slipping it into his coat pocket, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air as he considered what this unexpected inheritance might mean for his future. He had spent the last 8 years working as a ranch hand in Colorado, saving every spare dollar and dreaming of owning his own place someday. His Uncle Morton, whom he had met only twice in his life, had apparently remembered him in his will. The property was described as a cabin with surrounding land near Apache Junction in the Arizona Territory, a place Nathan had never visited, but had heard described as wild country, where the desert met the mountains, and a man could make something of himself if he had enough grit. Within 2 weeks, Nathan had collected his final wages, packed his belongings into 2 worn saddle bags, and purchased a sturdy roan gelding he named Copper for the long journey south. He was 26 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work, with dark brown hair that tended to fall across his forehead and hazel eyes that carried both determination and a hint of loneliness. His parents had died when he was 17, leaving him to make his own way in the world, and he had learned early that survival meant keeping your head down and your expectations reasonable. The journey to Arizona took nearly 3 weeks, traveling through mountain passes still clogged with winter snow, and then down into warmer country, where the landscape gradually transformed from pine forests to scrubland, dotted with saguaro cacti and mesquite trees. Nathan spent his nights camped under stars that seemed impossibly bright, and his days pushing forward, driven by curiosity about what awaited him at the end of this journey. When he finally reached Apache Junction in early March, the town was smaller than he had expected, consisting of perhaps 24 buildings scattered along a dusty main street with the dramatic silhouette of the Superstition Mountains rising in the background. He stopped first at the land office, a cramped building that smelled of old paper and tobacco smoke, where a clerk with spectacles perched on his nose confirmed Nathan's ownership of the property. "Your uncle's place is about 8 miles northeast of here, up in the foothills," the clerk explained, unrolling a map and pointing with a tobacco-stained finger. "Follow Peralta Trail until you reach a fork by the Big Cottonwood, then take the eastern path. The cabin sits in a small canyon with a reliable spring. Good water year-round, which is worth more than gold in this country." Nathan thanked him and purchased supplies at the general store, loading Copper with flour, beans, coffee, salt pork, and other necessities. The store owner, a heavy-set man named Grimes, gave him a strange look when Nathan mentioned where he was headed. "Old Morton's place," Grimes said, scratching his beard. "Heard someone was living up there after he passed. Might want to introduce yourself proper before you just ride in." Nathan frowned at this information, wondering who would be occupying his property and whether they knew the ownership had transferred. He decided not to worry about it until he saw the situation for himself, and after a hot meal at the town's only restaurant, he loaded his supplies and headed out following the clerk's directions. The trail climbed gradually into the foothills, winding through stands of palo verde trees and past massive boulders that looked like they had been carelessly tossed by giants. The air was warm but not yet carrying the brutal heat he had been warned characterized Arizona summers. Birds called from the brush, and twice he spotted mule deer watching him from rocky outcrops before bounding away. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Nathan reached the fork by the cottonwood and turned eastward as instructed. The path narrowed here, clearly not traveled frequently, and he had to duck beneath low-hanging branches several times as Copper picked his way carefully along the rocky trail. Then he rounded a bend and saw the cabin nestled in a small canyon, just as the clerk had described. It was a simple structure built from rough-hewn logs, with a stone chimney from which a thin ribbon of smoke was rising. A small corral held 2 goats and a spotted horse, and he could see a vegetable garden laid out to one side, the plants still small but neatly tended. Someone was definitely living here, and from the looks of things, they had been here for some time. Nathan dismounted, his hand instinctively moving to check that his pistol was secure in its holster, though he had no intention of drawing it unless absolutely necessary. He approached the cabin cautiously, aware that in this country, unexpected visitors could easily be mistaken for threats. Before he could knock, the door swung open and Nathan found himself staring down the barrel of a Winchester rifle held by a woman whose blue eyes were as sharp as the mountain air. "That's far enough," she said, her voice steady despite the slight tension in her shoulders. "State your business." Nathan slowly raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. Now that he could see her properly, he realized she was likely close to his own age, perhaps slightly younger, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid and sun-bronzed skin that spoke of outdoor work. She wore men's work clothes, canvas trousers, and a faded blue shirt, but there was no mistaking her femininity despite the practical attire. "My name is Nathan Kendrick," he said calmly. "I received word that I inherited this property from my uncle, Morton Kendrick. I did not mean to startle you, but I was told this was my land now." The woman's eyes narrowed, though the rifle barrel lowered slightly. "Morton Kendrick was your uncle?" "Yes, madam. I have the papers from the land office in town if you want to see them." She studied him for a long moment, and Nathan could see her mind working behind those intelligent eyes, weighing his words and his appearance against whatever she knew of the situation. Finally, she lowered the rifle completely and leaned it against the door frame. "I suppose you had better come inside then," she said. "We have things to discuss." Nathan followed her into the cabin, which was small but remarkably well maintained. A fire burned in the stone hearth, and he could smell beans cooking in a pot hanging over the flames. The furnishings were simple but adequate: a table with 2 chairs, a bed in one corner with a curtain that could be drawn for privacy, shelves holding various supplies, and a rocking chair near the fireplace. Everything was clean and orderly, showing the care of someone who took pride in their home. "My name is Nora Vance," the woman said, turning to face him. "I have been living here for nearly 8 months. Your uncle and I had an arrangement." Nathan removed his hat, holding it in his hands. "What kind of arrangement?" Nora gestured for him to sit at the table while she poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that had been staying warm by the fire. She set one in front of him before taking the other seat, her hands wrapped around her own cup. "I arrived in Apache Junction last summer, fleeing a difficult situation back in Texas," she began, her voice matter-of-fact despite the personal nature of what she was sharing. "I had some money saved, enough to start over, but finding a safe place for a woman alone proved challenging. Your uncle was in town one day and we struck up a conversation. He was getting older and found the isolation up here difficult to manage. We made a deal. I would take care of the place, the garden, the animals, keep everything running, and in return I could live here safely." "What happened to my uncle?" Nathan asked. "The telegram said he passed, but gave no details." Sadness flickered across Nora's face. "He had a bad fall about 5 months ago, hit his head on one of those rocks out by the corral. I rode into town and brought back the doctor, but there was nothing to be done. He lived for 2 more days, enough time to make his peace. He never mentioned having a nephew, but then again, he was a private man. The lawyer in town handled everything after. Nathan absorbed this information, feeling a pang of regret that he had never made the effort to know his uncle better when the man was alive. "I am sorry for your loss. It sounds like you cared for him." "He was kind to me when I needed kindness," Nora said simply. "That matters more than most things in this world." They sat in silence for a moment, both contemplating the unexpected situation they now found themselves in. Nathan studied Nora more carefully now, noting the strength in her hands, the confidence in her bearing despite her circumstances, and the wariness that never quite left her eyes. Whatever she had fled in Texas, it had taught her to be cautious. "What was your plan?" Nora asked finally. "For this place, I mean. Are you planning to live here yourself?" Nathan nodded slowly. "That was my intention. I have been working ranches for other people for 8 years. I wanted a place of my own, a chance to build something that belonged to me." This seemed like the answer I had been waiting for. "I see." Nora's expression was neutral, but Nathan could see her mind working through her options, none of which were likely appealing. A woman alone in frontier country had few good choices. "But I did not ride all this way to throw you out into the cold," Nathan continued. "You have clearly been taking good care of the place. The garden looks well tended, and the cabin is in better shape than I would have expected. You said you had an arrangement with my uncle. Perhaps we could work out something similar." Nora's eyebrows rose slightly in surprise. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Nathan had not actually thought that far ahead, but now he considered the practicalities. "The cabin is small, but there is space. We could divide it properly, give you privacy. You continue to handle the garden and the household matters. I will work on improving the property. Maybe build another room or two, expand the livestock. We split the proceeds from whatever we sell, and you have a safe place to stay for as long as you need it." He could see her working through the implications, her natural caution warring with what had to be relief at not being displaced. "People in town would talk," she said. "A man and woman living together unmarried." "Let them talk," Nathan said. "As long as we know the truth of it, what does it matter? Though if you would prefer, I could sleep in the barn until I build an addition to the cabin." "There is no barn," Nora pointed out. "Just the small corral and a lean-to for the horse." "Then I suppose that is the first thing I will need to build." Nora studied him intently, as if trying to see past his words to his true intentions. Nathan met her gaze steadily, understanding her caution. He had sisters before they had died of fever, and he knew how vulnerable women were in this country, especially those without male protection. Whatever Nora had run from in Texas, she had good reason to be suspicious of men's motives. "I will agree to your proposal on a trial basis," she said finally. 1 month. If it proves workable, we can continue. If not, I will take my share of the proceeds and find somewhere else to go." Nathan extended his hand across the table. "That seems fair to me." Nora hesitated only briefly before shaking his hand, her grip firm and sure. "Very well then, Nathan Kendrick. Welcome to your property." That first evening passed in practical discussions about the property, the livestock, the water situation, and the various tasks that needed attention. Nora showed Nathan around the immediate area as the light faded, pointing out where she had been planning to expand the garden when the weather warmed more, and explaining that the 2 goats provided milk and occasionally cheese. The spotted horse was named Patches and had belonged to Morton, gentle and reliable for the occasional trip into town. When darkness fell, Nathan insisted on making his bed outside, rolling out his blankets beneath the overhang of the lean-to despite Nora's protest that he was being ridiculous. He wanted her to feel safe, and that meant giving her complete privacy in the cabin until he could build proper separate quarters. The night air was cool but not uncomfortable, and Nathan lay awake for a long time, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert and thinking about the surprising turn his life had taken. He had expected to arrive at a vacant cabin and begin the solitary work of building a new life. Instead, he found himself in a peculiar partnership with a woman he had just met, a woman who intrigued him more than he wanted to admit. The way she had held that rifle, the competence with which she managed the property, the wariness in her eyes that suggested hard lessons learned, all of it painted a picture of someone far more complex than a simple damsel in distress. He found himself wanting to know her story, though he suspected she would not share it easily. Over the next several days, Nathan and Nora settled into a cautious routine. She rose before dawn to tend the animals and start breakfast, and he woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon, feeling grateful despite his determination to maintain appropriate boundaries. They ate together, discussing the day's tasks, and then went their separate ways to work. Nathan's first priority was indeed a barn, or at least a larger shelter for the horses, and a place where he could store tools and supplies without crowding the cabin. He selected a site about 50 yards from the cabin, near enough to be convenient but far enough to provide some separation. The work was hard, cutting timber from the surrounding hills and hauling it back, but Nathan was accustomed to physical labor and found satisfaction in seeing the structure take shape. Nora continued her work with the garden, expanding it as planned and also making improvements to the corral fence that had been sagging in places. Nathan noticed that she was skilled with tools, handling a hammer and saw with the competence of someone who had learned by necessity. She did not ask for his help with her projects, and he sensed she took pride in her self-sufficiency. So he let her work independently unless she specifically requested assistance. In the evenings, they shared meals and conversation, though both remained somewhat guarded, feeling out the boundaries of this unusual arrangement. Nathan learned that Nora had grown up on a farm in East Texas, the youngest of 4 children and the only girl. Her mother had died when she was 12, and she had taken over running the household while her father and brothers worked the land. "I learned to do everything out of necessity," she explained one night as they sat outside watching the sun set over the superstitions. Cooking, sewing, gardening, even some carpentry and livestock management. My father believed girls should be useful, not decorative. "Sounds like he raised you right," Nathan observed. Nora's expression darkened slightly. "He did, until he decided I was a commodity to be traded. When I was 19, he arranged a marriage to a man nearly 40 years old, a neighbor who wanted a young wife to give him sons. I objected, but my father said I was being foolish and ungrateful. The man had money, and my father needed it." Nathan listened without interrupting, sensing this was not a story Nora told often. "I married him because I had no choice," she continued, her voice flat. "For 3 years, I endured a marriage to a man who saw me as property he had purchased. He was not physically violent often, but he was cruel in other ways, controlling, dismissive, determined to break my spirit." "What happened?" Nathan asked quietly. "He died," Nora said simply, "thrown from his horse during a storm. I mourned publicly for the appropriate period, but privately I felt nothing but relief. Then I discovered he had left the farm to his brother, not to me. His brother made it clear I was not welcome to stay unless I agreed to marry him instead. That was when I packed what I could carry, took the small amount of money I had hidden away, and left Texas forever. Nathan felt anger rise in his chest at the casual cruelty she described, the way the men in her life had treated her as less than human. "I am sorry you endured that. No one should be treated such a way." Nora turned to look at him, searching his face for something. "Why did you agree to let me stay? Most men would have sent me packing immediately, taken the property for themselves." "Because it was the right thing to do," Nathan said. "And because you clearly belong here more than I do. You have put work into this place. You deserve to benefit from that." "Is that the only reason?" Nora asked, and there was something in her voice Nathan could not quite identify. He considered his answer carefully. "I won't lie and say I do not find you interesting. You are capable, intelligent, and stronger than most men I have worked with. But I promised you a business arrangement, and I intend to honor that. Whatever else I might think or feel is irrelevant unless you decided otherwise." Nora held his gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Thank you for your honesty." As March turned to April, the weather grew warmer and the desert exploded into unexpected bloom. Wildflowers carpeted the hills in shades of yellow, purple, and red, and the harsh landscape revealed a beauty Nathan had not anticipated. The barn was now complete, a solid structure that gave the property a more established feel, and he had begun work on an addition to the cabin that would create a separate bedroom and expand the living space. The physical work was demanding, but Nathan found himself energized rather than exhausted. Part of that energy came from the land itself, the stark beauty and the sense of possibility it represented. But if he was honest with himself, much of it came from Nora's presence. He found himself looking forward to their evening conversations, to the sound of her laughter when something amused her, to the way her face softened when she talked about her plans for the garden. He was falling for her, slowly but undeniably, and he knew he needed to be careful. She had been clear about the arrangement between them, and he would not jeopardize her safety or comfort by pushing for something she was not ready to consider. One afternoon in mid-April, Nathan returned from town with supplies to find Nora in the corral, working with a young calf that had apparently wandered onto the property. She was trying to check its leg, which seemed to be injured, but the frightened animal kept pulling away. "Need some help?" Nathan called, setting down his packages. "If you could hold him steady, I can wrap this leg properly," Nora replied, not taking her eyes off the calf. Nathan climbed into the corral and managed to calm the animal enough for Nora to examine the injury. "Looks like he got tangled in some wire," she said, her fingers gentle as she probed the wound. "The cuts are not too deep, but they need to be cleaned and wrapped." Working together, they treated the calf's injuries, Nora's medical knowledge proving as practical as everything else about her. When they finished, the animal was resting more comfortably, and they stood together by the corral fence, both dusty and tired but satisfied with their work. "Where do you think he came from?" Nathan asked. "Probably one of the ranches to the east. Cattle wander sometimes, especially the young ones. We should ask around in town, see if anyone is missing stock." Nathan nodded, then noticed a smudge of dirt on Nora's cheek. Without thinking, he reached out to brush it away, his fingers gentle against her skin. Nora stiffened slightly at the contact, and Nathan immediately withdrew his hand. "I am sorry," he said quickly. "You had dirt on your face." Nora touched her cheek where his fingers had been, her expression unreadable. "It is fine," she said quietly. I am not accustomed to gentle touches." The admission hung between them, weighted with everything she had endured in her marriage. Nathan felt his heart constrict at the thought of how she had been treated, how she had learned to expect harshness instead of tenderness. "You deserve gentleness," he said, the words coming out more intensely than he had intended. "You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, not as property or an inconvenience. Nora's eyes widened slightly, and Nathan could see genuine emotion flickering across her face before she schooled her expression back to neutrality. "You are a surprising man, Nathan Kendrick." "How so?" "You say what you mean. You do what you promise." "In my experience, that is rare enough to be remarkable." Before Nathan could respond, Nora turned and headed back toward the cabin, leaving him standing by the corral with his heart beating faster than the simple conversation warranted. He recognized this feeling, the way his thoughts kept returning to her throughout the day, the way he found excuses to be near her, the way her smile seemed to light something inside him that had been dark for too long. He was in love with her, or at least well on his way to being so. The realization should have troubled him more than it did. They had known each other barely 6 weeks. Their arrangement was supposed to be purely practical, and Nora had given no indication she wanted anything more. But the heart, Nathan was discovering, had little regard for practical considerations. That night, a spring storm rolled through the mountains, bringing thunder that echoed off the canyon walls and lightning that turned the darkness into brief moments of brilliant daylight. Rain hammered against the roof, and Nathan lay in his new bedroom in the cabin addition, listening to the storm and feeling grateful for solid walls and a dry place to sleep. He heard movement from the main room, and then a soft knock on the door frame. The addition was complete enough to sleep in but still lacked a proper door. "Nathan." Nora's voice was quieter than the storm but carried clearly. He sat up immediately. "Is something wrong? The roof is leaking in the main room, right over my bed. I cannot sleep there tonight without getting soaked." Nathan grabbed his shirt and pulled it on as he moved to the doorway. Sure enough, he could hear water dripping steadily somewhere in the main room. He lit a lamp and found the leak, a steady drip falling right onto Nora's pillow. They quickly moved her bed away from the drip and placed a bucket to catch the water. "You take my bed tonight," Nathan said. "I will sleep in the chair or make a bedroll on the floor out here." "Do not be ridiculous," Nora said. "Your room is large enough for both of us to sleep decently separated. We are both adults. We can share space for one night without compromising anything." Nathan hesitated, knowing it was improper but also recognizing the practicality of her suggestion. The addition was indeed large enough for 2 people to sleep with appropriate space between them, and they had been living under the same roof for weeks now anyway. "If you are comfortable with it," he said finally. Nora gathered her blankets and pillow and moved into the new room while Nathan arranged his bedroll on the floor, leaving the bed for her. She protested, but he insisted, and eventually she relented. They settled in, the lamp extinguished, with the sound of rain continuing outside and the occasional drip of the bucket filling in the next room. "Nathan," Nora's voice came from the darkness. "Yes, thank you for everything. For letting me stay, for treating me with respect, for being different than what I expected. You do not need to thank me for basic decency. Perhaps I should not have to, but experience has taught me that decency is not as common as it should be." Nathan heard her shift in the bed above him. "For what it is worth, you have made this place feel like a home in ways I did not expect. I thought I wanted solitude, a chance to build something alone. But having you here, working alongside you, sharing meals and conversation, it is better than anything I imagined." There was a long silence, and Nathan wondered if he had said too much, revealed feelings that would make her uncomfortable. Then he heard her voice again, softer now. "I have been afraid to trust anyone, especially men. My father sold me, my husband abused me, his brother tried to trap me. I came here determined to rely only on myself, to never again put my fate in someone else's hands. But you have been kind without expecting anything in return. You have kept your word about everything. I find myself wanting to trust you, even though it frightens me." Nathan's heart was pounding now. He wanted to go to her, to hold her and promise that he would never hurt her, but he remained where he was, understanding that trust had to be earned through patience and consistency, not passionate declarations. "You can trust me," he said quietly. "I cannot control what other men have done to you, but I can promise that I will never deliberately cause you harm. Your safety and well-being matter more to me than my own desires." "What are your desires?" Nora asked, and there was something vulnerable in the question that made Nathan choose his words carefully. "I desire to wake up every morning and see you tending the garden. I desire to share meals with you and hear about your day. I desire to work alongside you to make this place thrive. And I desire, more than I probably should admit, to have the right to care about you openly, to be more than just a business partner or housemate." The rain continued its steady rhythm on the roof. Nathan could hear his own heartbeat in his ears as he waited for Nora to respond to his careful confession. "I think," she said finally, "that I might desire those things too. But I am afraid of what it means, afraid of being hurt again, afraid of losing the independence I have fought so hard to gain." "Love does not have to mean losing yourself," Nathan said. "The right kind of love should make you more yourself, not less. It should be a partnership of equals, not a master and servant. Is that what you are offering me?" "Love?" Nathan took a breath. "I am offering you the chance to discover what we could be together without pressure or expectations. We continue as we are, living and working together but with honesty about our feelings. If something grows from that, we let it. If not, we remain partners and friends. You remain free to make your own choices always." He heard the bed creak as Nora moved, and then suddenly she was there beside his bedroll, kneeling on the floor. In the darkness, he could barely see her face, but he could feel her presence, smell the faint scent of the lavender soap she used. "I want to try," she whispered. "I want to believe that what we have could be real, could be safe. But I need you to be patient with me. I need time to learn how to trust again." Nathan reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and gently took her hand. "We have all the time you need." Nora's fingers tightened around his, and they stayed like that for a long moment. Hands clasped in the darkness while the storm raged outside, and something new and fragile began to grow between them. When Nora finally returned to the bed, and they both settled in to sleep, something fundamental had shifted. They had crossed a line from cautious cohabitation to acknowledged mutual feeling, and though Nathan knew the path forward would require patience and care, he felt more hopeful than he had in years. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the air clean. Nathan woke to find Nora already up, and when he emerged from the bedroom, she was making breakfast and humming softly to herself. She smiled at him when he entered, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, and Nathan felt his heart skip. "The leak does not look too bad in daylight," she said, pointing to the damp spot on the ceiling. "We can patch it easily enough." They spent the morning fixing the roof, working side by side on the ladder while the sun warmed their backs. There was an ease between them now that had not been there before, as if acknowledging their feelings had released some tension they had both been carrying. They talked and laughed, and once Nora reached over to steady Nathan when he nearly lost his balance, her hand firm on his arm. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Nathan could remember. They continued their work on the property, expanding the garden, improving the barn, and beginning to build a small hen house for chickens they planned to purchase. But now, there was an additional dimension to their time together, moments of connection that went beyond practical partnership. Nora began to share more about her past, Not just the painful parts, but also happy memories of her childhood, her mother's gentleness, her brother's protectiveness, before they had all grown apart. Nathan told her about his own family, the parents he had lost too young, the difficult years of finding his way alone, the ranches where he had worked and the people he had met. One evening in early May, as they sat outside watching the stars emerge, Nora moved closer to Nathan on the bench he had built, close enough that their shoulders touched. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. She was choosing proximity, choosing trust, choosing him. "Tell me something about yourself that no one else knows," Nora said. Nathan considered. "I am afraid of deep water. When I was a boy, I nearly drowned in a river, and I have never fully gotten over the fear." "Really? I would never have guessed. You always seem so fearless." Fear is not the absence of courage. Sometimes doing something despite being afraid is the truest kind of bravery. Nora nodded thoughtfully. "I am afraid of being trapped again. Sometimes I wake up in the night and have to remind myself that I am free, that I can leave if I want to, that no one owns me." "You are free," Nathan said firmly. "Always. No matter what happens between us, you are your own person with your own choices." She turned to look at him, her face serious in the starlight. "I am starting to believe that. Being here with you, I am remembering what it feels like to be valued for who I am, not what I can provide." Nathan reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture tender and unhurried. This time Nora did not stiffen or pull away. Instead, she leaned into the touch, her eyes closing briefly. "You are remarkable," Nathan said softly. "Strong and capable and beautiful, inside and out. Any man would be blessed to earn your affection." "I think you might have already earned it," Nora admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's breath caught. They were close enough now that he could see the flecks of darker blue in her eyes, could feel her breath on his face. He wanted to kiss her more than he had ever wanted anything, but he waited, letting her set the pace, giving her control. Nora lifted her hand and placed it against his chest, over his heart. "I can feel it racing," she said. "That is what you do to me." She smiled, tentative but genuine. "I think perhaps we do it to each other." Then she closed the distance between them and kissed him, soft and questioning. Nathan responded gently, keeping the kiss tender even as everything in him wanted to deepen it, to pull her closer. This was Nora's moment, her choice, and he would follow her lead. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing harder. Nora's cheeks were flushed, and she looked surprised by her own boldness. "That was my first kiss that I actually wanted," she said. "Everything before was obligation or endurance, but this with you, I wanted it." Nathan felt anger flare again at what she had endured, but he pushed it aside, focusing instead on the gift she had just given him. "I am honored, truly." They stayed outside for another hour, sitting close together, talking quietly and occasionally sharing soft kisses that felt like promises of more to come. When they finally went inside, Nora hesitated at the doorway to Nathan's room. "Would you mind if I slept in there again tonight?" she asked. "Not because of the leak, but because I sleep better when you are near." Nathan's room had acquired a proper door now, and he had built a second bed in there as well, claiming he wanted the option for guests, though they both knew he simply wanted Nora to feel comfortable sharing the space. "Of course," he said. "Whatever makes you feel safe." They settled into their separate beds, but before Nathan could blow out the lamp, Nora spoke. "Nathan, would you hold my hand, just until I fall asleep?" He crossed the small space between the beds and took her hand, their fingers intertwining. "I would be happy to." Nora fell asleep quickly, her breathing evening out, but Nathan stayed awake longer, marveling at how his life had changed. 2 months ago he had been alone, uncertain of his future, wondering if he would ever find a place to truly call home. Now he had land, a home he was building with his own hands, and a woman who was rapidly becoming the center of his world. He knew they still had obstacles to overcome. Nora's fear of vulnerability was real and justified, and he would need to continue proving himself worthy of her trust. They would need to navigate the practical realities of their situation, decide what they wanted their future to look like, perhaps eventually marry if Nora could overcome her understandable reluctance about that institution. But lying there in the darkness, holding the hand of the woman he loved, Nathan felt certain they could work through anything as long as they faced it together. The next morning, their routine continued as always, but now with small touches and shared smiles that made ordinary tasks feel special. Nora would brush past Nathan as they worked, letting her hand trail across his back. Nathan would bring her wildflowers he found on his trips to collect wood, small bouquets that she would place in jars around the cabin. One day in late May, they made the trip to town together to sell eggs and vegetables from Nora's expanded garden. Grimes at the general store gave them a knowing look when they came in together, clearly having heard gossip about the situation at the old Kendrick place. "Heard you two are making a go of it up there," he said, his tone neutral but his eyes curious. "Making a good living, yes," Nathan replied evenly. "The land is treating us well. Must be nice having help," Grimes continued, looking at Nora. "Place like that is too much for one person alone." "Nathan is right that we are partners," Nora said, meeting the store owner's gaze steadily. "We share the work and the rewards equally. It is a good arrangement." After they completed their business and loaded new supplies, they stopped at the restaurant for a meal before heading back. While they ate, Nora suddenly reached across the table and took Nathan's hand, right there in public where anyone could see. Nathan raised his eyebrows questioningly, and Nora smiled. "I am tired of hiding or being ashamed. You matter to me, and I do not care who knows it." Nathan turned her hand over and raised it to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "You matter to me too, more than I can properly express." Around them, Nathan could see other diners noticing their display of affection, could feel the weight of their judgment and speculation. But he found he did not care what strangers thought. Nora was right. What they had was real and good, and it deserved to be acknowledged openly. On the ride back to the cabin, Nora was quiet but seemed content, and when they reached home, she surprised Nathan by suggesting they take a walk up to the spring that fed their water supply. It was a beautiful spot, tucked into a rocky canyon with cottonwood trees providing shade and the water emerging from the rocks to form a clear pool before trickling down to the valley. They sat on the sun-warmed rocks beside the pool, and Nora leaned against Nathan's shoulder. "I have been thinking," she said. "About what? About the future, about us, about what I want my life to look like." Nathan's heart beat faster, but he kept his voice calm. "And what do you want?" "I want this. The land, the work, the partnership. I want to keep building something meaningful. But more than that, I want you. I want to wake up beside you every morning. I want to share not just a house, but a life. I want what I never had in my marriage, a true partner who sees me as an equal." Nathan turned so he could look at her properly. "You have me. You have had me for weeks now, if I am being honest. I love you, Nora, not despite your strength and independence, but because of it. You are everything I did not know I was looking for." Nora's eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you too. I did not think I could feel this way again, or maybe I never felt it before. What I had with my first husband was nothing like this. This feels like choosing life instead of just enduring it." Nathan cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, deeper this time, pouring all his feelings into the connection. Nora responded in kind, her arms coming around his neck, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, Both were flushed and breathing hard. "I want to marry you," Nathan said. "But only if you want it to, only if you are ready. I know marriage holds painful associations for you. We do not need papers to make this real." Nora was quiet for a long moment, and Nathan could see her working through her complicated feelings about marriage, weighing her past experiences against her current feelings. "I want to marry you," she said finally. "But I need it to be different, not a transaction or a transfer of property. A true partnership, acknowledged before witnesses, but built on love and mutual respect." "We can make it whatever we want it to be," Nathan assured her. "We can write our own vows, make our own promises. The only thing that matters is what we say to each other." Nora smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then yes, yes, I will marry you, Nathan Kendrick." Nathan kissed her again, joy flooding through him. 2 months ago he had been alone. Now he had everything that mattered: a home, work he loved, and a woman who owned his heart completely. They decided to marry in late June, giving themselves time to prepare and to make the trip to town for the legal necessities. Nora sewed herself a new dress, simple but beautiful in deep blue fabric that matched her eyes. Nathan purchased new clothes as well and spent extra time on his appearance the morning of the wedding, wanting to look his best for the woman he loved. The ceremony was held at the small church in Apache Junction, with the circuit preacher officiating and a handful of townspeople in attendance, including Grimes and his wife, the land clerk, and a few others who had gotten to know Nathan and Nora over the past months. It was simple and brief, but when Nathan and Nora exchanged the vows they had written themselves, promising partnership, respect, and love, there was not a dry eye in the building. "I promise to honor your independence and never try to control you," Nathan said, his hands holding hers. "I promise to be your partner in all things, sharing burdens and joys equally. I promise to love you for who you are, not who I might want you to be. I promise to work every day to be worthy of your trust." Nora's voice was steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I promise to trust you with my heart, even though it scares me. I promise to be honest with you about my feelings and my fears. I promise to work alongside you to build a life we can both take pride in. I promise to love you with everything I have, for all the days we are given." When the preacher pronounced them married and Nathan kissed his wife, the small congregation applauded. It was not a grand affair, but it was exactly what both of them wanted: authentic, meaningful, and theirs. They celebrated with a meal at the restaurant, and then made the journey back to their cabin as the sun began to set. When they arrived home, Nathan lifted Nora across the threshold, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture made sweeter by the knowledge that this was truly their beginning. That night, they came together as husband and wife, and Nora discovered what physical intimacy could be when it was based on love and mutual desire rather than obligation and endurance. Nathan was patient and gentle, attuned to her responses, ensuring her comfort and pleasure. It was revelation for both of them, passion tempered with tenderness, creating a bond that went beyond the physical to touch something deeper. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Nora traced patterns on Nathan's chest with her fingers. "I never knew it could be like this," she whispered. "I never knew I could feel so safe and so desired at the same time." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "Every day with you is a gift I did not expect to receive. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy." "You already make me happy, just by being exactly who you are." As summer deepened into July and August, Nathan and Nora settled into married life with an ease that felt natural despite the short time they had known each other. They worked the land together, expanding their livestock to include chickens and a few cattle, improving the cabin and outbuildings, and establishing themselves as a successful homestead. In town, the initial gossip about their arrangement faded as people saw the genuine partnership and affection between them. Nora proved herself knowledgeable about medicine and practical healing, and soon people were coming to her for help with various ailments, which she provided freely, earning respect and gratitude from the community. Nathan discovered he had a talent for training horses, and word spread that he could gentle even the most difficult animals. He began taking on horses from local ranchers, working with them in the corral while Nora tended to her various projects. They made a good living, better than either had expected, and began to talk about long-term plans for the property. One evening in September, as they sat outside enjoying the cooler air that came with the approaching fall, Nora made an announcement that changed everything. "I am going to have a baby," she said quietly. Nathan's head whipped around to stare at her. "What? Are you certain?" Nora nodded, her hand moving unconsciously to her still flat stomach. "I am certain. Based on my calculations, the baby should arrive in late March or early April." Nathan felt a wave of emotions so intense he could barely process them. Joy, fear, excitement, worry, all mixing together until he did not know whether to laugh or cry. "How do you feel about it?" he asked, knowing this had to be complicated for Nora given her experiences in her first marriage. "Terrified," Nora admitted, "but also happy. My first husband wanted children desperately, and when I could not conceive during our marriage, he blamed me for being barren. He used it as another way to make me feel inadequate. Now I realize it was perhaps a blessing that I did not bring a child into that situation. But this is different. This baby was conceived in love, and it will be born into a home where it is wanted and cherished." Nathan pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with love for this woman who had been through so much and still found the courage to embrace new possibilities. "We are going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a family. Are you happy about it?" Nora asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "Happy does not begin to cover what I feel. I am awed and grateful and more in love with you than ever. We are going to raise this child together, give it everything we can, and make sure it knows it is loved every single day." Nora relaxed against him, and Nathan felt her relief. She had been afraid he might react badly, might see the pregnancy as a burden rather than a blessing. He made a mental note to reassure her of his feelings frequently as her pregnancy progressed. The months that followed were busy with preparations. Nathan worked on expanding the cabin again, this time adding a small room that would serve as a nursery. Nora sewed baby clothes and collected supplies, and they both read everything they could find about infant care, determined to be as prepared as possible. Nora's pregnancy progressed normally, and Nathan found himself falling even more deeply in love with his wife as he watched her body change to accommodate their growing child. She remained active and capable throughout, refusing to let pregnancy slow her down until the final weeks when her size made certain tasks impractical. In late March, as promised by Nora's calculations, she went into labor. Nathan rode hard to town to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered half the babies in Apache Junction. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day, and Nathan paced anxiously outside the bedroom door, feeling helpless and terrified. When he finally heard the thin, wavering cry of a newborn baby, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Chen emerged a few minutes later, smiling. "You have a healthy son," she announced, "and your wife did beautifully. She is tired but well." Nathan rushed into the bedroom to find Nora propped up against the pillows, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. His son. His and Nora's son. "Come meet your boy," Nora said softly. Nathan approached on shaking legs and looked down at the small face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making small snuffling sounds. Nathan felt his heart expand in a way he had not thought possible, love for this tiny person washing over him. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "You are perfect, both of you." "We were thinking about names," Nora said. "What do you think of Thomas, after my mother's father?" "Thomas Kendrick," Nathan tested the name. "I like it, Thomas it is." He carefully took his son from Nora's arms, supporting the tiny head as Mrs. Chen had shown him, and marveled at how light and fragile the baby felt. This was his child, his responsibility, his to protect and raise and love. The weight of it was enormous, but so was the joy. Over the next weeks, Nathan and Nora adjusted to life with a newborn. Thomas was a healthy baby with strong lungs, and he kept them up many nights with his demands for feeding and attention. But neither of them minded. They took turns walking him when he was fussy, sang to him, talked to him constantly despite knowing he could not understand the words yet. Nora proved to be a natural mother, confident in her instincts and patient with Thomas's needs. Nathan watched her nurse their son and felt a sense of completeness he had never experienced before. This was his family. This was home. As spring turned to summer and Thomas grew from a tiny newborn into a more substantial baby with a ready smile for his parents, Nathan and Nora found their rhythm. The work of the homestead continued, but now with a baby in a sling on Nora's back or sleeping in a shaded basket nearby while his parents worked. On a warm evening in June, almost exactly a year after their wedding, Nathan and Nora sat outside watching the sunset while Thomas drowsed in his mother's arms. They had come so far from that first cautious meeting when Nora had greeted Nathan with a rifle and suspicion. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Nora asked. "If you had insisted I leave, if I had been too afraid to trust you, if we had never taken the chance on each other." "I try not to," Nathan admitted. "The thought of not having this, not having you and Thomas, is too painful to contemplate." "I almost left, you know," Nora said quietly. "That first month I had my bags packed twice, convinced that staying was too risky, that I should not let myself depend on anyone. But something kept me here. Some instinct that told me you were different, that this could be different. I am glad you stayed. I am glad you took the risk. You and Thomas are everything to me." Nora looked up at him, her blue eyes warm in the fading light. "You saved me in a way. Not in some dramatic rescue, but in the quiet, everyday ways that matter most. You showed me what I was worth, what love should actually feel like. You gave me back myself." Nathan leaned down and kissed her softly. "You saved me too. I did not even realize how alone I was until I met you. You made a house into a home and a piece of land into a life worth living." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, the three of them together in the home they had built through trust, hard work, and love. Thomas stirred and made small sounds in his sleep, and both parents smiled at the familiar noises. The years that followed were good ones. The homestead prospered, their reputation for quality livestock and produce growing. Nathan's horse training business expanded, and Nora's medical knowledge became increasingly valuable to the community. They became respected members of Apache Junction, known for their generosity and the genuine partnership that characterized their marriage. Thomas grew into a lively, curious boy with his mother's blue eyes and his father's dark hair. When he was 3, Nora became pregnant again, and this time she was less frightened, more confident in her ability to bring a child into the world. Their daughter, Sarah, was born in the spring of 1880, a healthy baby girl who wrapped both her parents and her older brother around her tiny fingers from the moment she arrived. Nathan expanded the cabin once more, adding more rooms to accommodate their growing family. What had started as a simple log structure was now a proper house, comfortable and well-built, filled with the sounds of children's laughter and the warm glow of family life. One evening, when Thomas was 7 and Sarah 4, the family sat together around the dinner table, and Nathan looked at each of their faces in turn. Nora, now 30 years old, was more beautiful to him than she had been the day they met, her face showing the character that came from a life well lived. Thomas, earnest and thoughtful, was already showing signs of the good man he would become. Sarah, bright and fearless, challenged them daily with her endless questions and boundless energy. "I want to tell you all something," Nathan said, and the children quieted, sensing this was important. "Your mother and I did not have an easy path to this family. We both had difficult times before we found each other. But everything we went through brought us to this moment, to this table, to this life together. I want you to remember that families come in all different ways, but what matters is love, respect, and choosing each other every day." "We know you love each other," Thomas said matter-of-factly. "Everyone knows that. You are always holding hands and smiling at each other." Nora laughed, reaching over to tousle her son's hair. "Is that so obvious?" "Very obvious," Sarah agreed. "Jenny Miller says her parents do not even talk to each other at dinner, but you two talk all the time." Nathan caught Nora's eye across the table, and they shared a smile that held years of shared experiences, overcome obstacles and deepening love. They had built something remarkable here, something that had started with a business arrangement born of necessity, and grown into a love story neither of them had expected, but both treasured. As the years continued to pass, Nathan and Nora watched their children grow, helped them navigate the challenges of school and friendships, taught them to work the land and value honest labor. They added to the livestock, improved the irrigation for the crops, and gradually built the homestead into one of the most successful small operations in the territory. When Arizona became a state in 1912, Nathan and Nora were in their 50s, still working the land though they had begun to slow down slightly with age. Thomas, now married himself with children of his own, had taken over much of the physical labor. Sarah, strong-willed and independent like her mother, had shocked everyone by becoming a teacher in Phoenix, but she visited often, bringing stories of the changing world. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Nathan and Nora made the trip back to the spring where Nathan had proposed all those years ago. It was harder for them to make the climb now, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work, but they made it to the same rocks where they had sat as young people falling in love. 30 years, Nora said, settling beside Nathan with a small sigh of effort. "It has gone so quickly." "The good things always do," Nathan replied, taking her hand in his. Her fingers were more gnarled now, marked by arthritis and labor, but to him they were as beautiful as ever. "You have any regrets?" Nora asked. Nathan considered the question seriously. "I regret that I did not meet you sooner. I regret the years you suffered before you found your way here, but as for our life together, not a single moment. Not even when Thomas broke his arm falling from the barn, or when Sarah decided to raise that skunk as a pet, or when the cattle got loose and we spent 3 days rounding them up," Nathan chuckled. "Those were all adventures, character-building experiences." Nora leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never thought I could be this happy. When I left Texas, I was just trying to survive, to find some peace. But you gave me so much more than that. You gave me a real life, a family, a partnership that made me stronger rather than diminishing me." You did the same for me. I was existing, going through the motions, but not truly living. You taught me what it means to share a life with someone, to build something together that is greater than what either of us could have created alone. They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the play of light on the water. The spring still flowed as it always had, constant and reliable, much like the love they had built here. "Promise me something," Nora said quietly. "Anything. When our time comes, whether it is tomorrow or many years from now, promise me you will remember this. How happy we were. How much we loved each other. How we turned something that started as a practical arrangement into the kind of love people write stories about." Nathan raised her hand to his lips and kissed it tenderly. "I promise, though I fully intend for us to have many more years to make even more memories." "I intend the same. We have grandchildren to spoil and crops to plant and horses to train. We are not done yet." As the sun began to set, painting the canyon in familiar shades of orange and gold, Nathan helped Nora to her feet, and they began the slow walk back to the house they had built together. It stood solid and welcoming in the gathering dusk, lights already glowing in the windows where their children and grandchildren waited. Nathan paused at the top of the trail, looking back at the cabin that had been the starting point of everything. "Thank you," he said to Nora. "For what?" "For taking a chance on a stranger who showed up claiming to own your home, for trusting me when you had every reason not to, for building this life with me, for loving me despite my flaws, for giving me everything I never knew I needed." Nora reached up and cupped his weathered face in her hands. "Thank you for being worth the risk. Thank you for being patient with my fears. Thank you for showing me that not all men are like the ones who hurt me. Thank you for giving me the freedom to be myself and the security to trust again. Thank you for 30 years of partnership, love, and joy." They kissed there on the trail as the first stars emerged. Two people who had found each other against the odds and built something lasting and true. The journey from that first tense meeting to this moment had been filled with challenges and triumphs. Fears overcome and love deepened. A testament to the power of choosing to trust and the rewards that come from genuine partnership. As they walked the final stretch to the house, their grandchildren burst out the door to greet them, a chaos of young voices and eager hugs. Thomas and his wife had prepared a special dinner to celebrate the anniversary, and Sarah had traveled from Phoenix for the occasion. The table was set with their best dishes, and there was laughter and warmth filling every corner of the house. During dinner, Thomas stood and raised his glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "who taught me through their example what love really means. Who showed me that marriage should be a partnership of equals, that respect and affection are not optional extras, but the very foundation of a life together. Who built this home and this family with their own hands and their stubborn dedication to each other. May we all be so blessed as to find what you have found." Everyone raised their glasses, and Nathan felt Nora's hand find his beneath the table, their fingers intertwining in the familiar gesture that had marked countless moments of their lives together. After dinner, as the younger generation cleaned up despite Nathan and Nora's protests, the couple slipped outside onto the porch. The night was cool and clear, the stars brilliant in the dark sky. From inside came the sounds of their family, the voices blending together in conversation and laughter. "This is what I dreamed of," Nathan said softly. "Not this exactly, because I could never have imagined anything this good, but the feeling of it. Belonging somewhere. Having people who matter and who matter to me. Making a difference in the world, even if just in this small corner of it." "We did make a difference," Nora agreed. "We raised good children who are raising good children in turn. We built a successful homestead that provides for our family and employs others. We became part of a community, and we loved each other well. That is a life to be proud of." Nathan pulled her close, and they stood together looking out over the land they had tended for 3 decades. The mountains rose dark against the stars, constant and eternal. The spring still flowed in the canyon, the crops still grew in the fields, the animals still needed tending. Life continued in its rhythms, and they were grateful to still be part of it. In the years that remained to them, Nathan and Nora continued to work the land they loved, though they gradually transferred more responsibility to Thomas and his family. They spent more time with their grandchildren, passing on skills and stories, ensuring that the values that had guided their lives would continue in the next generations. They celebrated each anniversary, each birthday, each small milestone, never taking for granted the gift of time together. They faced the challenges that came with aging with the same partnership that had characterized their entire marriage, supporting each other through aches and pains, and the inevitable slowing down that came with the years. Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, with Nora beside him as she had been for 47 years. His last words to her were, "I love you," the same words he had spoken countless times throughout their marriage, but which never lost their meaning or their power. Nora grieved deeply, but also with gratitude for the years they had shared. She lived another 3 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, tending her garden, and often sitting by the spring where Nathan had proposed, feeling his presence in the constant flow of the water and the whisper of the wind through the cottonwoods. When she died at 76, surrounded by family, her last thoughts were of Nathan and the incredible journey they had shared. From that first tense meeting when she had held a rifle on a stranger claiming to own her home, to the deep and abiding love that had sustained them through decades of life together. Their story was one of courage, trust, and the transformative power of genuine partnership. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the homestead, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their lives. But their true legacy was not in stone but in the family they had raised, the land they had tended, the community they had served, and the example they had set of what love could be when built on respect, trust, and mutual devotion. The homestead continued in the family for generations, each new occupant aware of the story of Nathan and Nora, the strangers who had become partners and then lovers, who had built something extraordinary from an unexpected beginning. Their story became part of the land itself, woven into the history of the place, a reminder that the best things in life often come when we take risks, trust in possibilities, and choose to build something meaningful with someone who shares our values and our dreams. In the end, theirs was a simple story made profound by the depth of feeling and commitment they brought to it. A man bought a cabin in the mountains and found the woman living there. Through patience, respect, and growing affection, that woman became his wife. Together they built a life that honored both of them, raised a family, established a successful homestead, and created a love story that lasted not just until death but beyond it, living on in the memories and values of those who came after. It was a love built on a foundation of trust, hard-won and carefully maintained. It was a partnership that made both of them stronger and more whole. It was a marriage that transformed two wounded, cautious people into confident, loving partners who faced life's challenges together and celebrated its joys with grateful hearts. And it all began with a telegram, a journey to unknown country, and a woman with a rifle who was brave enough to trust again, and a man patient enough to prove himself worthy of that trust. From those humble beginnings grew something remarkable, something lasting, something that proved that love, when nurtured with care and respect, could not only survive but thrive, creating ripples of goodness that extended far beyond the two people at its center. The cabin still stands, expanded and modernized but recognizable as the same structure where their story began. Visitors sometimes come, drawn by the family history or simple curiosity about the past. Those who know the full story pause at the graves on the hill, reading the simple inscriptions and thinking about the lives represented there. Nathan Kendrick and Nora Vance Kendrick. The stones read, along with their dates. But to those who knew them, who heard their stories, who benefited from their example, they were so much more than names and dates. They were proof that it is never too late to start over, that love can heal old wounds, that partnership and respect form the bedrock of lasting relationships, and that the courage to trust again, even after betrayal and hurt, can lead to the greatest rewards. Their story, born in the wild landscape of the Arizona Territory in the late 19th century, speaks to timeless truths about human connection, the nature of love, and the possibility of redemption and new beginnings. It reminds us that family can be built as well as born, that home is where we create it, and that the most profound journeys often begin with a single brave step into the unknown. Nathan took that step when he traveled to claim an inheritance from an uncle he barely knew. Nora took that step when she chose to stay and trust a stranger instead of fleeing to another uncertain situation. Together, they continued taking steps, building a path forward one choice at a time, until those individual steps became a lifetime of shared journey.